Guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel and thanks for tuning in. Late night in the tackle room here, man. Been a long day. I had to get up this morning at 5:30, had an on the water lesson, fished all day long. Came home, Johnny and I had our weekly live podcast at fishthemoment.com, or Fish the Moment Live YouTube channel. Did that. It's wrapped some Christmas presents, got the kids in bed. So it's I'm ready for bed myself. So I wanted to get today's YouTube video over, or done for you guys tomorrow. And the topic I want to talk about today is who is the best jerkbait fisherman in history. And you guys know that I've been doing a lot of jerkbait stuff, love fishing it. It's jerkbait season, we're right in the middle of it right now. So I thought it'd be appropriate to go over the best jerkbait fisherman that's ever lived. Real quick before we get started here, speaking of jerkbaits, I want to remind you guys, Johnny and I are going to be conducting our first seminar, our first online seminar on January 20th. It's going to be an advanced jerkbait fishing class on fishthemoment.com. If you guys are interested in signing up for this class, this is going to be a 3-hour online seminar. Johnny and I are going to give you all the juice on jerkbait fishing. Johnny's going to cover a lot of jerkbait applications for offshore fishing, like with live scope. I'm going to give you all the other applications for jerkbait, colors retrieved, cadences, type of areas to look for. 50 years knowledge that I have about jerkbait fishing. So if you guys want to be part of that online seminar, you can sign up for it by going to fishthemoment.com. You can just sign up. The class is limited to 30 people, so they're going to fill up pretty quick. So if you guys want to check it out and join us for the seminar, just go sign up for it on fishthemoment.com. Much appreciated. And I'll keep you guys updated. I don't know how soon this is going to fill up. It's probably going to be pretty quick. So if you're interested, get signed up for it. Much appreciated. Okay, let's talk a little bit about who, in my opinion, was the best jerkbait fisherman in history. Nobody's going to guess what this is either. If you guess what this is, if you guess who this is, it's going to be the biggest surprise of my life. But I'm going to tell you guys a story about the best jerkbait fisherman ever lived. His name was Jess Poindexter. And first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about Jess and why I say that. This was back, I knew Jess back in the 1970s when I was still in high school and college, or high school and just starting college, back 1978, 79, 80, that type of stuff. And back then, there were only two jerkbaits. There was the Spoonbill Rebel minnow, and then there was later there was the deep diving Rogue minnow. At that point, there wasn't even sage in here. At that point, there wasn't even a traditional jerkbait like some type of a medium diving Rogue or something like that. It was all just the two deep divers, deep diving Rebel, deep diving Rogue. Now Jess was one of those guys. He was the pioneer. You talk about where jerkbait fishing started. All you guys you talk about the top jerkbait fishermen in the world today. Some people say like Hank Cherry, some people say Kevin Van Dam was great, whatever. Jess Poindexter is the father of the modern jerkbait fishing. Jess was one of those guys that developed the technique of catching bass on suspended jerkbaits. And he was sort of a legend. He was from Webb City, Missouri, sort of a legend. The guy didn't fish tournaments at all. And I started hearing about Jess through some of my buddies that knew him. Some of my buddies' dad that knew him. He was probably 15, 20 years older than I was. I think he's still alive. He's got to be close to 80 years old. But anyway, some of my friends had a chance to fish with Jess, and they would tell me about how many giant bass he'd catch every time they went out. And I'd heard about this for 2 or 3 years. I kept hearing these stories. It's like, man, such and such, he went with Poindexter and they caught a 9 and a 10 and a 7.5 and an 8. This was all at Table Rock, some at Bull Shoals, but mainly Table Rock. Back in the heyday of Table Rock, when you still had a lot of standing timber, cedars, that type of stuff. And I kept hearing about this over and over and over. And the guy never fished tournaments. He was just one of those guys that fished for fun. And on top of that, everything he caught, he filleted out. He there was no catch and release with Poindexter. It was all catch and fillet out, which I didn't really like. So anyway, I kept trying, a couple of my friends, I kept trying to get, to basically get closer to get where I could go fishing with Jess. I wanted to go fishing with Jess Poindexter and learn how to fish a jerkbait because he was like the master at it. And the legend was just growing all the time. It's like every single time somebody went with him, they'd come back and say, you know, he caught 3 7s or the 9.5 and just on and on and on, all on a Spoonbill Rebel. So anyway, to make a long story short, I never did get a chance to fish with Poindexter. He would not take me. He would not, and he'd only take a handful of people, like guys he worked with or something. It was really, really odd, but he was one of those guys. He was just super secretive, even though he didn't fish tournaments. But anyway, I learned enough through these buddies of mine that fished with him to know that he was the greatest jerkbait fisherman ever. And what happened is, you got to remember, guys, this was before jerkbait fishing anyone knew anything about it. People think jerkbait now is just a staple in fishing, but it wasn't back then. This was before anyone knew what a jerkbait was. A lot of people had never even heard of the term jerkbait. But anyway, Jess was one of the, probably the first guy to figure out to take these Spoonbill Rebel striper lures and wrap solder around the hooks to get them where they suspend perfectly neutral, and throw them next to standing timber and cedar trees on Table Rock Lake, catching these giant bass. And what he would do is, this was even before suspend strips. This was all they had to weight stuff with, was solder around the hook, putting it around the middle hook of the bait. They would weight it perfectly depending upon the water temperature, get it where it would not move an inch. And my buddies would tell me what Poindexter would do is he'd cast this thing out past a cedar tree that was in 20 foot of water or something like that, and he literally let the thing set for 2 to 3 minutes without even moving it. And he mastered the art where he could read the wind, and he could throw that Spoonbill Rebel out there. He'd reel it down and let the wind drift it into the close to those cedar trees, and literally not move the bait for 2 to 3 minutes. And all of a sudden, he said, he'd just sitting there, and I guess he was a smoker, and he'd smoke during the time he was, you know, holding it, and he'd just hold that rod there 2 to 3 minutes, and that Spoonbill Rebel was just suspended perfect next to that tree. And all of a sudden, the line would just start moving out like a catfish, and he'd set the hook, and it would be a giant, you know, 7 to 10 pounder Table Rock. And this went on for year after years. And the more that I got realizing about that, the more that I realized that he understood not only how bass suspended over deeper, clear water in the cold water conditions, but what it took to generate the strike. I mean, you couldn't reel this thing down and let it set for 3 to 4 seconds like we do now and catch one. Back then, that's how they caught the giants, and that's why he, you know, developed this reputation for just catching giant bags of fish and never even fishing a tournament before. So anyway, that's my story of who I think is the greatest jerkbait fisherman that ever lived. Was the one that actually started the technique, Jess Poindexter. No one knows that. I mean, there's a handful of people on this planet. You know, I know 2 or 3 people that even know that. And you know, all of the modern jerkbait fishing that you have today can be you know, traced back to that old dude in Webb City, Missouri back in the 70s that developed this technique of Spoonbill Rebel fishing that basically evolved into the suspended jerkbait fishing we have today. All of the Japanese jerkbaits you guys see now, the whole technique, Jess Poindexter is one that started that out. Eventually it got out because when somebody, you know, consistently brought back 7 to 10 pound bass at Table Rock Lake, trip after trip after trip, you know, eventually it started leaking out a little bit. But anyway, I never did get a fish with him. I saw him actually 3 or 4 years ago at a funeral, and you know, talked a little bit to him, but I was always wanting to go out with him and learn from him with that. So anyway, guys, that's today's video. Just want to throw that out there, a little off-the-wall video. Much appreciated. And like I said, if you guys want to learn a lot of the stuff that I learned from Poindexter and throughout the years on my own, sign up for that advanced jerkbait seminar at fishthemoment.com, and hope to see you guys there. See you.